Hey, welcome back to the video series. You're watching Luke RS. That is my name. You can call it Lucas if you want. In this first video, we're going to be looking at creating the walls. Okay, so the walls that you see here. And you'll see that the way that I've done this with the line of sight is a bit of a cheat method for line of sight. It means I don't actually have to code anything for line of sight, but the walls will naturally take care of this. Now, I came up with this method after, I guess it's not an original method. There's a few games that utilize this. There was an older game that I played once called Teleglitch, I think, and I think a more recent game called Ape Out utilizes this method, where this model here is actually a lot bigger than it looks. It incorporates the line of sight into it. So while it kind of the top down and it looks like that Legend of Zelda dungeon style where we see the walls and we don't see anything beyond it, what we're actually seeing is a very large model. But the camera is positioned above the player, and the camera vision into the other room is blocked by these black walls. Now the material on this is the black as black we could get. It has no reflection, it has 100% roughness, and it has zero metallic and zero specularity. So even if we were to put a point light right up to it, it's not going to show any reflection whatsoever. It will always look like there's just nothing there. So it's a really cool little hack workaround for line of sight that's very cheap to do, and it looks pretty neat, I think. So let's get into that. We're going to load up Blender. And I am also using a resource pack called Odyssey, the sci-fi resource pack. And you can download that. I can't distribute it. Well, I suppose I can distribute it. I'll link to it on the YouTube channel, but I'm not using it for commercial purposes, and I'm not going to be modifying these textures or anything. This is just something that you can download. I'm going to be using it in my project. Okay, the reason for that is they look pretty nice. You could use any texture pack for this really, but I'm going to use this sci-fi texture pack in here. So it is for Minecraft, but it doesn't matter, we can still use it here. It does have additional models as well, so you may decide that you want to use that. You could probably find for characters, you could probably find a Minecraft character somewhere and use that. Okay, so I'm in Blender here, and I'm actually going to use this default cube, and we're going to make the floor first. So I'm going to move this up. Now, if I hold Control, it will, by default, lock to increments. So I'm going to just move it up along the Z axis. That was GZ, hold Control, move it up. And then I'm going to go in and edit this. Actually, I'm going to move it down along the Z axis, because I want the floor to be on that kind of flat ground there. And you'll see why shortly. I am going to set the origin to be the 3D cursor. So the origin of the model is here. If I go back to my Godot project and have a look at this here, you'll see that the floor sits below everything else. All right, now for the floor, we're just going to grab the bottom of this and bring it up 1 unit. So I can hold Control and bring it up 1 unit. Okay, we could essentially delete it. The only thing we'll ever see is that top bit, but sometimes there's few little glitches in Godot where you don't have a surface, and I can kind of demonstrate that right here if I run it. There is, for this wall right there, there's not actually a face on this side of it. So when I build it, I'm going to build a face into it and actually make it a little bit bigger so it sits into the wall, so we don't get that there. And what we don't want is to be able to see gaps through each of these floor units. So I'm going to put the faces all around. Going back to Blender. All right, this part's pretty easy. All I'm going to do is add a material. Now, I'm going to make everything in one model and then export them all separately. There's a bit of a weird thing that you need to do when you export them though. We're going to need to kind of move them to the origin as we export them. That is because the method of exporting I'm going to use does not take the model's origin as the origin. It takes the whole world origin as the origin, which is a bit annoying, but it will still work. So we're going to go to the materials panel here, and this material I'm just going to call black. the base color black. And we're going to turn the specularity down and the roughness up. Let's put it into material preview mode, viewport shading up here. And you see here that it's very dark. There's not going to be any reflections on that. And now I'm going to go into edit mode, select the top face, add a new material, and I'm going to call this floor panel 1. The reason I'll call it floor panel 1 is I might have another floor panel 2. And I don't want to overwrite that when I bring it into Godot. When you import a model into Godot, it looks for a material that already exists. And if it does, it doesn't import it again. That means if I've got two different material or two different textures for floor panel, it will just ignore the second one that I bring in. And the first one will just be there. So I'm going to give them different names. And I'm going to click this and change it to image texture. I will also assign that. So that is set to there. And click open. And these are all the textures from that Minecraft pack. Now they look blurry, but when I actually bring them in, they're not going to be blurry. And I'm going to select an appropriate one for the floor. So I'm going to use this one here. You'll see they've got funny names, and that's because they're named after the Minecraft texture that they actually replace. So none of the names actually mean anything. This is not brown terracotta. It just replaces brown terracotta in Minecraft. I'll click open image. Now that doesn't show up yet. The reason for that is that I need to go into UV editing. And this here is actually really easy. I'm just going to hit U and unwrap. I want to unwrap the whole face to this surface. Then I can go back to layout mode and you'll see that that's done. Now this here has got this texture filtering on. And there's not actually any need to do it in Blender because you have to do it again in Godot anyway, but I will change it down here. So from linear to closest, and that will give us that there. Now I'm going to go ahead and open a new project in Godot. I've already done this here. I've made a folder called Blender Models, which I'm going to go ahead and delete all the things in here. I must have already created some stuff here, so I'll just go ahead and delete all that and we'll start that again. Okay, so I've made a project in Godot. It's just an empty project at the moment. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this. I'm going to go ahead and save it into my Blender Models folder, which is in the Godot thing. Just for backup, I'm going to call this blocks. That'll do. Okay, so let's go ahead and make the wall. We'll import these separately. I'm going to go ahead and add in another mesh, a cube. I'll move this cube along the y-axis 2 units just so I can edit it here for now. And this is going to come up 1 unit, and then I'm going to select the origin. I'll actually set it back to here first. Set the origin to the 3D cursor, and then I'll move it along 2 units. All right, so going straight into edit mode, I'm going to select that top face and hit E and 8 and then enter. That's going to set that up 8 units. 8 units I found is pretty good. Depends on the camera height. If you want to have the camera higher, you may have to set this higher later on. But I think 8 is a pretty good size and will mean that we don't need to worry too much about the camera height. You can set it higher, it doesn't matter. The top part here, I'm just going to go ahead and assign black to the whole thing. Then I'll select the bottom bit, and this is where I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to call this wall panel 1. I could be more descriptive if I knew what wall panel I was going to use. So that's going to be wall panel 1, and I'll assign that and set the image, not magic texture, the image texture to, what did I click? Open. And I'll go to block and I'll use an appropriate wall texture. So I'm going to do a few of these. I'll grab this one here, click open. Looks really funny. That's because it's not UV mapped. So I need to go into, oh, what happens if I click UV? I don't want to. Here. And I'm going to unwrap each of these separately. So U, unwrap, U, unwrap. You could just click over here and then click here and hit U, and that would do the same thing as well. I'll turn on viewport shading here, and you'll see that these two need to be rotated. So I just hit R90 over here. I'll select them all, R90, and they are now upright. and then I'll go to here and change that to closest. Now I'm going to duplicate that one, Shift D, Y, move it along 2 units, and I'm going to change this here. So I'm going to click this button to make it unique. Okay, so these, I didn't use Alt D because I don't want them to be exactly the same, Shift D, and I'm going to call this wall panel 2. This material though, I'm going to change. You see that I can just change it very quickly. So I'm going to have a different a different wall panel. For this one, I think I might use, oh, there's so many. I want one that's kind of very generic and it's just going to be good for making a whole lot of walls. There was one that I found, there it is, that's pretty good. Okay, so you see, that's done. I could just go through, I could do it again, Shift Y, and this time here I'll make a duplicate of that, call it wall panel 3, and I'll pick one more. I'll pick this one very quickly, blocks, and we'll use that one there. Okay, so I've got some walls. I could go ahead and make as many walls as I want, but I am going to make one more thing now. So I'm going to duplicate this and hit Shift D and move it along 1 unit. And this is a little bit tricky, this one. I do need to edit it, and I'm going to go in and select everything, and scale it along the X-axis till it says 0.2 along global X. It says it up here. It says it up here, SX. I can just type 0.2, and that will give me something that thick. Now this is going to be my door panel. And there's a few ways I could create this door, but I'm going to have it open or animate and open from the middle outwards. And to do this, I'm going to need to actually do a ring cut down here, and I'm going to delete half of it. So I'm going to select these edges here, or these faces, this face, and then delete those vertices. So I've just got half of it there. Okay, and then I'll need to fix these ones up. So I'll go back into edge mode. I'll just isolate this one so we can see what I'm doing. Select this edge here, and these 3 edges, my mistake, and hit F, and then these 3 edges. If I just did it the other way, it would have made one face, and then this wouldn't have been split. Now this down here, this face down here, I'm going to assign it that wall panel texture. Looks kind of janky. I just hit U and it's fixed. Now I could position that somewhere better. Maybe I could rotate it 90 degrees and hit, kind of put it there, like that. Looks a bit better. I'm not too fussed about where that is. Okay, I could probably do the same for this one because it's currently all out of proportion. So that's good. I've just got some textures there so that when the door opens, it's not hollow. And then I'm going to duplicate it, Shift D, R, Z, 180. It's going to flip it around to the other side there. So I've now got 2 of those. So that's going to be my door. I could make multiple of these. Very easy to, Shift D, Y, move that along. And then that, I've made a mistake here, I think, because I've called that wall panel 3. You'll notice, oh no, that's fine. That goes to there. So for this one, I'm going to change this, and I'm going to call it door panel 1. And this one here is also going to use door panel 1. Now I'll change this one, click X and open, and we'll go to block down here, and I'll pick an appropriate door texture. This one here might look pretty good. Okay, it doesn't really, but I'll work with that. And then this one here, I'm going to make a new one. It's going to be door panel 2, and I'll assign that to there as well. So I'll edit this one, open, block. I'm sure there's a really good door texture here I can use somewhere. That's not too bad. It kind of looks like an old school Doom door. That might be pretty good. If that was centered, that would look kind of cool. There is one texture that I found here that was It's pretty much centered straight down the middle. That could look pretty decent. So you can just fast forward while I scan through all these textures for what feels to me like a long time. Here we go. I'm going to use that one. Okay, so there we go. I've got that door there. You'll see that it's the same on both sides. I'm not too worried about the inside there. Okay, so I've got all these models. Now I actually want to get them into Godot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save this first as blocks, and then I'm going to export. So I'm going to export them as a GLTF, but these settings up here, you need to have a look at what I'm doing. So GLTF embedded, and I'm going to click remember export settings. I'm going to include only selected objects. What are custom properties? No. The transform is going to be Y up. The geometry, all that's going to be left as usual. We do want materials, we do want vertex colors, we do want the normals, and we do want the UVs, and we haven't used any modifiers, but if we had, we would tick apply modifiers. And lastly, the animation we're going to untick. We don't want any of those animations there. And I'm going to export it directly into my Godot folder. So this is the Godot folder. I'm going to make a new one and call it game models. And in here, I'm going to call this one floor panel and export that. I've clicked remember export settings here, export that. Now I'm going to do the same with this one, but I'm going to move it back to the origin before I export it. So file, export, GLTF. It has remembered those settings. And I'm going to call this wall panel 1. Export that. I'll repeat the same thing with this here. I'll show you what happens if you don't set it to the origin. File, export, GLTF. You'll see that it includes only the selected objects. You do not want to include the camera or anything else like that. This is going to be wall panel 2. Export that. Now for this one, I'll just export and show you what happens. GLTF, wall panel 3. I will bring a door across. Now these doors, I'm going to make them like a single, I'm going to select both of them, move them across here, and file, export, GLTF, door 1. Export those. All right, so let's go back to Godot. Let's imported all our things. They should be in game models. And just to demonstrate how these work, I'm going to click on 3D scene and drag one in. So door 1, it's fine. It goes there. I haven't turned snapping on, but if I turn on snapping in the world, which is here, should be able to snap it. I'll go to transform over here and just reset that. I haven't actually figured out how to kind of snap things in to Godot when you bring them in initially. So that has come in, it's in the right place. You can see it's the right size, 2 units here, just as it was in Blender. Now the texture's funny, but that's okay because the textures have come through separately down here. So I'm going to click on door panel, double click it, and over here under Albedo, I'm going to click the texture and then untick filter. Done. Easy. So that's how we fix those. I'm just going to delete that one. And then I'm going to bring in wall panel, I think it was wall panel 3. No, not the material, wall panel 3. Now you'll see if I click on this, the origin is all the way here. That's because I didn't set it to the origin. And it gets really annoying. So you will want to make sure that you do that. I can sit that there. Once again, I'm going to go through all of these and click on Albedo, click on texture, untick filter on all of these because I don't think there is a way to automatically do it. Albedo, texture, filter, Albedo, texture, filter. Cool. All right, in the next video, we'll look at creating the Godot scenes for these and how a scene is going to be constructed because we're going to need some physics objects in here. And we'll also look at creating the door animation. So that's in the next video. Just you should be able to click in it should show up in the next little thing there. I haven't quite figured out how to add like little panels and stuff here yet, but if it's not here, if it's not in the playlist, then just find it on my channel. It should be called part 2.